much warning, but a couple people found out. Looks like we already have some comments here too. But we could
Cool.
we can give people a minute to get joining us. Did you go for your walk this morning with the dogs?
Suki wasn't up for a walk today, so Foxy and I went out for a little bit.
All right.
So it varies. Let me close the door. My neighbor is shooting again. Hold on just a second.
Man, okay. I can't hear it, but it sounds good.
It might get loud. We'll see.
All right. What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us today. We're definitely going to be taking questions here. We've got a topic, as you probably saw. I'm going to intro that in just a minute here once Scott gets his house organized. We'll let him get situated and stuff again. What's going on, everybody? I see Josh Strange is with us from Strange Creations. This is my two favorite Scotts. What's up, Chris? Chris is with us. He says, I switched to mostly doing rest pause sets. Those seem to give me really good gnarly DOMs. So this is going to be a good potential addition. I was saying that if anybody had any questions, they could comment with them. But what do you say? I'll just bring this thing in, Scott, and we'll get it rolling.
Cool.
All right. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by you. Thank you to everybody from Patreon for helping to support the show. Even in this last week where things kind of went sideways, we're getting back on the roll now. And we are brought to you by, got my shirt on today, TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over at True Nutrition to support our programming. I mean, you need protein powder as a bodybuilder, right? If you shop at True Nutrition, I can absolutely guarantee you that you're getting the best quality protein powder you can, and you're getting it for a good price, and you're supporting our show when you use our code THINK. Also, supplementsource.ca for our Canadian folks. Thank you guys for your support up there in the Great North. Questions. Comment with questions through the show. We're doing this thing live. The more you guys comment, we can't always, mention you or get back, but we're going to try. And all your interactions, that all help. So definitely try to like and comment all that stuff in the live stream and comment afterward. That still helps too. And if you're not subscribed to our content, guys, we have several bodybuilding podcasts that come out each week. So Scott, we were kind of looking at some of our old topics, and one of the old topics we had done is, do DOMs equal muscle gains? Does muscle soreness equal muscle gains? And I thought it was a good topic to revisit. I have some more thoughts on it. It's been a couple of years since we talked about it, and I would love to hear you dig into this one again.
Well, I'm interested in your new thoughts before I go on the probably just repeating what I had to say years ago.
Hey, well, listen, you repeating yourself isn't a bad thing, because a lot of times you're going over my head by 15-20%. And so hearing it a couple times it can be helpful. But, here's my thought. So, years ago, I used to just try to absolutely smash a muscle group and get as much soreness out of it as I could. And then I began to get more involved with progressive overload, recognizing that, and one of the most important facts that I think we talk about on this channel is that progression doesn't necessarily mean adding more weight or getting more reps. Progression just simply means a novel stimulus, doing something you hadn't done before in some fashion. Maybe it's even just more control over the bar and that last 2 reps than you got last week. So I recognize that if I can do that, I have programmed myself to believe that that is the number one driver for growth, whether the muscle is sore or not. And in fact, if I can make that happen in a workout, if I can get that, I think of it as like a light switch, a trigger. If I can turn that trigger on for hypertrophy, then the more soreness I get, the longer it's going to take before I can repeat it and do that again. Ideally, I want to get in the gym, get that trigger, leave without soreness or the minimal soreness, right? And then be able to come back and do that again sooner. If I went back in to do my 3-hour leg days, sometimes 3.5 hours, I'm not kidding. Hand to God, 3.5 hours sometimes. If I were to go back and do that, my legs would be absolutely crushed for the entire week. Whereas if I can get in and do just what I needed and then get out, getting rid of, as everybody calls it today, the junk volume, I can get that trigger for growth again. So that's my main thing. So when I think of muscle soreness, I don't think of it as a good thing anymore. I used to think, yeah, muscle soreness is great. That tells me that I did a good job. But nowadays it tells me, okay, that means it's going to take me longer to recover from this workout.
Okay. So where do I start here? So soreness is it's a subjective perception of pain. Sometimes you can. One of the first comments here was that you can sometimes feel like you're getting soreness. It's not delayed onset muscle soreness, not truly DOMS. If you're feeling it right after the workout, at least that's not typically how it's defined, but it's an indication of some sort of injury that's occurred. The way I understand this, and there's multiple overlapping mechanisms that are involved here, but there's some primary insult that happens just after you train, that's leading to the delayed onset muscle soreness, some primary or initial injury that seems to be related at least to stretch and potentially also then associated with higher tensions. You get more soreness when you're doing eccentrics or doing eccentrics only. There's also some stretch-mediated ion channels that open up too. So that may be part of what's going on. The secondary inflammatory process that happens that then leads to the things that we see histologically in muscle cells. So if you have an initial insult, right, and let's say you produce a lot of tension doing eccentrics only, there's going to be some damage. It's not nearly as extensive as what you see a day or two later, especially if it's a novel bout. You take untrained people and just wreck them in the gym. But you'll see that the myofibrils are a little bit misaligned. The Z lines, so between the sarcomeres, this unit of muscle contraction, those can get a little messed up. The Z lines are where the actin thin filaments connect at the end of the muscle fiber. So that's connecting Z or sarcomeres are lined up in series along a myofibril inside a big muscle cell. Then that's those Z lines, Zwischenlinie, Z means zwischen in German actually, but that's the in-between. So that's the connecting point. So those will get kind of fucked up. And then what happens is probably very much related to like calcium influx and some calpains and other calcium activated proteases. Then you get calcium influx. There's influx of neutrophils. The immune system gets involved. You get this inflammatory response. And alongside of that, too, is satellite cells, which you talk about being so important, blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole bunch of things that are going on there. That can happen after you've performed an exercise bout that we know is hypertrophy producing. Okay. So weight training, right? You haven't trained for a while. You go in and you just do like 3 light sets of bench press and you're just wrecked. You're like, oh, shit, like really brush your teeth type of thing. You can also do that with downhill running, right? Or walking downstairs, eccentric-based exercise. That's novel and different. So it could be an endurance-based exercise, which we're not expecting. You can see a muscle growth in someone who's just a complete couch potato just when they start getting active again. But that's not going to be particularly great. So the muscle soreness is related to an injury that has a sort of initial insult related to various things. Eccentrics seem to be the best for doing that. So we think that tension's involved. I still think the tension's somewhat involved, but it can happen just from stretching. There are various experimental models where you can produce sort of a primary injury or something that then leads to that secondary inflammatory response. So that's the big part about the soreness. So the question then is, like, the more soreness we have, and this is kind of what you're getting at, is that better? Well, it tells you that you did something novel. And as long as you're not like, you're used to weight training, you say, I'm going to just go to the top of Pikes Peak and run down and then see if my quads grow. It's like, well, you're going to be sore as crap. You could potentially even be looking at rhabdo if you're genetically prone to that. So the soreness just tells you you've got an injury. But if you're doing something that's hypertrophy producing, and let's say you produce soreness, let's say in your low back, which you've never been able to hit, in your physique that it's lacking, and now you do like row stop deads, one of my favorite exercises, which it really nails your low back. We talk about that. I think on the Blood, Sweat, and Gear. I think when you posted that video.
Yeah, we did.
So,
That one's not out yet. It's actually going to come out after that this week.
okay.
But yeah.
Oh, perfect.
And guys, by the way,
People
that's
see
going to
that.
be on Rumble. So check that out over there.
Oh,
until we sort
sweet.
things out, that one's got to be over there for right now.
Right. So you do a weight training, you lift, which is going to produce muscle growth, and you get soreness somewhere where you haven't. That means that tells you something. It's not just completely, not that it doesn't matter at all. Now the devil's in the dose too. So for instance, if those are fibers or an activation pattern which you haven't been able to evoke before because you haven't been using that exercise, or your mind muscle connection was shitty and you're pulling in accessory muscles or whatever, that's a good thing. It means, oh shit, I hit that for the first time, and I know from my that I'm lacking there. Or you've got a muscle group that just isn't growing and you never get sore, and then all of a sudden you do a different exercise. Maybe you add a stretch to it the way you hadn't before, or you isolate better, you train your biceps, and you do like a major pinky twist, to use Dante's words, and you get the biceps in a way, and you take out the brachioradialis and the brachialis. So you get sort of like, okay, good, I got a novel stimulus. It's not just any stimulus that produces muscle injury. It's one that's going to produce growth if I can then progressively overload with it.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing in that context. Now, like I said, the devil's in the dose. John Meadows, when he was growing the best, he's talked about this, wasn't sore at all. Like, he wouldn't get muscle soreness, right? So if you produce a major insult, your recovery is going to have to match that. Some people do really well. They'll train with kind of a pro split, so to speak, and they'll train once a week, and they grow really well that way. You need more time to recover. And if you're going to train legs, let's say once a week, you would, I haven't seen this tested directly, but it would make sense that you would do more. Your total volume is going to be over time. And maybe for you that isn't junk volume, because that puts in motion a remodeling of the muscle cells that simply takes more and more days and you're giving it more time. So getting a little more sore would make sense then, because you got time to recover. So you do 20 sets and they're balls to the wall, and you wait a week. That might be okay for some people. It certainly works for a hell of a lot of pros. Yeah. And I always relate that back to my theory of, what's going on with satellite cells. I think they're important. It takes some time for satellite cells to do their deal in the skeletal muscle. But if you're someone who's like, I'm going to do 20 sets, and I'm going to do that 3 times a week for legs, it's probably going to be too much, right? Because you just can't recover from it.
Yeah.
So you can be sore, and been sore most of the time, and I've probably done too much. You can be sore and grow and it not be optimal, or you could be really, really recovering tremendously well, eating a massive amount of food. Another buddy of mine from grad school, he would just, guy could eat. He would just eat massive amounts of food. He was a power lifter, never did any formal bodybuilding. Like, he would go to the all-you-can-eat pizza buffet and he'd put down 2 pizzas, like, no problem.
Yeah.
Right? Cece's Pizza Buffet for like $4.99 or something like that, and he'd eat 32 slices of pizza, just crazy amount of food. And he wouldn't get sore because there's some impact there of insulin. He was recovering really well. That would happen when he's eating that much. When he wasn't, it wouldn't. So you can grow with soreness, you can grow without soreness, but it tells you that you've hit a muscle like you hadn't hit it before. And if you keep on, let's say, doing that exercise that gives you that soreness, you're like, oh, finally I'm getting it. And you say, well, I'm going to just do that every day. And you're always sore, and that's going to impair your recovery. It's going to impair your progress, and you can't progressively overload. Then that soreness isn't in your favor. It needs to recede at some point in time. So it's neither good nor bad. You can grow well without soreness. You can grow well with soreness, as long as to some degree that recedes, because that's indicative of muscle injury in some way, shape, or form. It's highly variable. Yeah. There are various genes involved with the cycle of insult and recovery. The ACTN3 gene, it codes for actinin 3. There are different single nucleotide polymorphisms there. That's involved with where this actin connects to those Z lines. And there's research a little bit mixed, but something's going on there genetically there. The isoform of interleukins that you have, interleukin 6 in particular, I believe, that's involved with inflammation. The extent to which you have that inflammation and is going to direct the remodeling and determine how long you need to recover. And then IGF-2, there's also some data suggesting that IGF-2, we don't know what it does so much. It's an insulin-like growth factor, but it's kind of a wild card. We know about insulin, IGF-1, IGF-2. They're all in the sort of the IGF family. And IGF-2 is like, what the fuck does this one do, right? But one thing it is seemed to be involved with, depending on which isoform you have there, which your genes produce in terms of the protein, the IGF-1 version that gets produced, does impact the extent to which you experience muscle damage and muscle soreness. And that's probably part of the growth that comes around. So you have an injury, you have inflammation, and then you recover, and then you grow, as long as you've got or repair at least, and hopefully grow if you're doing things right with the type of training you're doing. Your training's on point, your nutrition's on point, your recovery's on point. So that's like a nutshell encapsulation of this muscle soreness thing, and whether it matters or doesn't matter. It can be good, it can be bad.
Of course.
Yeah. It's like the Zen koan of the Taoist, or the koan of the Taoist farmer. Yeah. I've told you. I probably haven't told this one on the podcast. I don't know.
I don't think you have, but I heard it recently elsewhere, and I think it's a great parable or proverb.
It's a parable.
Maybe? Yeah. Why don't you share it with us?
I can tell it real quick. All right. So I'll tell. There's various versions. I'll tell my probably a very American version of it. But so there's a farmer, and he's just a lone farmer. He's got a small, humble farm, and his horse goes lame. And all of his neighbors come around, and he's a Taoist, right? So he's following the middle path, the middle way of Lao Tzu, and they say, "Oh my gosh, this is awful! How are you going to be able to run your farm? Like, you need this for everything that you sell at the market and support your family." And he's like this is just terrible. He's like, "Yeah, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad." And it turns out that the very weekend they're having a lottery in his village. Where they're giving away a horse, and lo and behold, he wins the horse. And everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, what a perfect stroke of luck. This is awesome. Like, now you have a horse, your problems are solved. This is great." He's like, "Yeah, maybe it is, maybe it's not." So brings the horse back to his farm, and his son is breaking the horse because it's just a young stallion. And so he can't even ride the thing. And trying to do that, the son gets bucked off the horse and breaks his leg. So the farmer's back in his he needs his son to help on the farm. It's like, oh, our neighbor's like, "Oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. Yeah. Now you can't take care of your farm. You're back where this is just terrible." And he's like, "Maybe it is, maybe it's not." And around that time, then the army comes around conscripting young men to be soldiers to go fight on the front, where it's a total losing battle. Anyone who goes there is probably going to end up dead. And because his son has a broken leg, he can't go. And they're like, "Oh, what a stroke of luck, that happened this way, that your son's leg is broken and he can't go fight the battle. This is just phenomenal. This is great." And he's like, "Maybe it is, maybe it's not." And that's the thing. You could continue that on and on. It's like we see these things. It's like, "Oh, this is just terrible." You have some horrible relationship. You have some horrible circumstance, but then you experience personal growth from it somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a wise and probably stretching it a bit to apply it back to muscle soreness, right? But in a way, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. In the essence, in the way that, like, if you think, "Oh my God, I want to avoid muscle soreness because that means I'm doing too much. I want to be like John Meadows and grow like weed and never be sore."
Yeah.
Like, what happens if you're not getting your low back to grow, or you're not hitting the long head of your triceps, and all of a sudden you experience muscle soreness? It's like, no, you don't just say that's bad. That's, in this case, probably good. That means you hit a muscle that you're trying to hit that you weren't able to hit before. And then if you say, "Well, you don't have any muscle soreness at all," it's like, "But you're not growing." Well, then probably having some muscle soreness would be indicative of hitting that muscle in a way you hadn't, creating a novel stimulus, creating the injury that leads to the soreness. So you want to have the soreness. So it's neither good nor bad. It kind of depends on the circumstances. And that's, at least from my perspective, contextualizing whether or not you have a sore muscle or don't have a sore muscle is the important part of it. To say soreness is bad, soreness is good, and this is the devil in the details, so to speak.
We had some questions that came in related to this, and a supplement that you don't hear talked about so much anymore was arachidonic acid. Also, there's a question about recovery for natural versus enhanced, Thomas. We'll get to you, but He says, George, he says, what are the benefits of adding something like arachidonic acid peri-workout to enhance the inflammatory process? Could this enhance mitokine release and maybe IGF-1 related peptides and variants?
This was the Bill Llewellyn had a supplement that was based on that. It, as far as I know, it did not take off. From what I understand, I've talked to a few people about this now, is that when they were taking it at this, that's a suggested dose, they were massively sore.
I heard that too.
Like crippling sore. Yeah. It's been kind of almost the universal response is that it's too much, right? So there might be a way to like microdose that for someone. I mean, I didn't mention this directly, but I think of this as this hormetic response, this sort of dynamic equilibrium. A small stimulus gives you a small adaptation. A larger stimulus gives you a larger adaptation. Then you get to some optimal stimulus relative to your ability to recovery. That would give you your optimal rate of adaptation. You go beyond that and you're doing too much. You can still grow when you've got a less than or an excessive stimulus.
Yeah.
So for some people, and this is the thing, this is important to understand, is that inflammation doesn't necessarily mean growth. We do know that if you use anti-inflammatories, for instance, that those will limit protein synthesis post-exercise.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's probably pretty important. Those will limit the satellite cell activity post-exercise. That's probably pretty important. So but there's also this study that I always mentioned that in older folks where they gave them anti-inflammatories and those given the anti-inflammatories grew better. So they probably brought them back to more towards an optimal level of stimulation relative to their ability to recovery. Older folks don't tend to be able to recover. There's various studies suggesting various ways that just the adaptability of older skeletal muscle, there is an aging effect on top of the effect of disuse that happens as we get older. We just don't move around. We don't, even untrained at 60 is different than untrained at 20.
Yeah.
So there's a difference there because of the 40 years of age. So,
oops, did I lose Scott here? What happened, guys? Hopefully I'm still with you.
Studies? Oh, you're frozen for me.
Okay. We back now?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I lost you for the last thing you started saying. So please start over.
I don't know that I've seen any direct studies with arachidonic acid.
Okay.
I wrote an article for it a long while back. Hypothetically, it would make sense if you have a suboptimal stimulus. This is the idea of the supplement, and then you could feed the pro-inflammatory pathways and outcompete omega-3s. Then that might be in that situation a way to proffer more muscle growth if you can turn on the inflammation. The thing that's interesting is omega-3s, DHA, EPA in particular, those tend to be, there's competition in terms of the enzymatic pathways involved with prostaglandin synthesis there. So omega-6s will compete with omega-3s. Omega-3s tend to be anti-inflammatory. I'm generalizing here. Omega-6s tend to be pro-inflammatory. And there are some studies actually with older and younger individuals suggesting that omega-3s can increase protein synthesis.
Okay.
So in response to amino acids. So you give amino acids, it turns on protein synthesis. Omega-3 feedings or having supplement with omega-3s means more protein synthesis. So that's interesting. It's all kind of contextual. So you can have anti-inflammation and get more protein synthesis. If you have more inflammation, it's worth trying. The thing that I think would make sense, if I were to decide to go that route, I would be very, especially me, because I tend to get sore really easily. I would be very, very careful as to how I dose that, and probably go way below what's the suggested dose is, and make sure that I'm recovering, and maybe only use it for muscle groups in the context and sort of this sort of particular kind of situation for a muscle that doesn't get sore, that's not growing. That's when I'd use it. I wouldn't use it for a muscle that tends to get sore easily, that's not growing. Probably not the issue. You got plenty of inflammation going there, at least based on the muscle soreness.
Yeah.
Right. This probably isn't going to help. So that's how I might use it. So you could use it like, whatever, calf training. Sometimes people they've done everything for calves. Like I'm kind of this way. My calves are just totally torn to crap anyway, but whatever muscle is left there, I can just bombard it and it doesn't really get sore anymore. If I wanted, if I had fully intact gastrocnemiae muscles on both sides and I wanted to make them grow and they weren't getting sore, that I might do that then that day, load those in the system.
Yeah.
The thing with omega-3s and omega-6s is they end up in the plasma membrane of the cells. So that's where they're available for prostaglandin synthesis. So it's not just this acute thing. You can load it in. It's not like taking an aspirin, it's in and out of your system and its effects are gone. It's the prolonged impact of having that in your diet. So that you can, now that I think about it, that you probably can have some minor effects. Let's say if you took omega-3s 5 days out of the week and omega-6s the day before and the day of, training that stubborn muscle group that never gets sore, and then went back to omega-3s, you might be able to sort of modulate your inflammatory response.
Interesting.
This is totally wild ass guess.
Right. I see where you're going.
Off my head right now. That might be a way. So you load the omega-3s in there to fill that aspect of the metabolic pathway and outcompete the omega-6s, and then you'd be devoid of incoming omega-3s when you load the omega-6s for like a couple of days a week.
Yeah,
that would be a cool study. It'd be cool to just futz around with.
So I know you're just riffing. You're just riffing at this point, though.
Totally.
So you're not going to have an answer to this, but if you were to be put on the spot, Lucas, of course, asks the next natural follow-up question: how much omega-3 would you recommend per meal? Let's say on those other days, the days you're not trying to take the omega-6s, to increase muscle protein synthesis.
4 grams of this prescription fish oil Lavasa, I think it's called, something like that. Lozava.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Smith et al. is the 2010, 2011 is one of the first studies. I think they were around that time. So it was a 4 gram of a. I think you can still get, your doctors will prescribe you this. It's a prescription omega-3.
Is there any difference in that though than a high quality, supplement brand of omega-3s? Because I heard that you can get just as good for a cheaper price. Just over the counter.
I mean, not that you're probably going to see tested in a study. With fish oils can oxidize.
Yeah.
Pretty readily too. So, it's a good idea to keep them in the fridge or even put them in the freezer. Like one way to get rid of the fish oil burps is actually to freeze the pills and just swallow the pills frozen. For whatever reason. Maybe they thaw out by the time they're out of your stomach and they don't burp back up. I don't know, but that seems to work. I believe I've also seen, I'm not going to say it, but the oxidation is theoretically an issue, but I don't think it's that big of an issue as what we might expect. But otherwise, if you got some like fish oil that goes on sale, right? You get it and the expiration date is 1 month later, produced in 2021.
Yeah.
It's been sitting in a hot warehouse, somewhere in South Texas for 2 years, at 123 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah. What about this? Wasn't John Meadows a fan of peanut butter pre-workout? That's got a lot of now all of a sudden I can't say it.
Arachidonic.
Thank you. I couldn't say it anymore.
You got arachnophobia for arachidonic acid.
Was he taking that for that reason, you think, or was he taking it just because he liked peanut butter pre-workout?
So. It's not like you take a lot of peanut butter. I've noticed this too when I've used that as a fat source. You get really inflamed.
Yeah,
it can make a big difference. Well, John would do that to stabilize blood sugar when you're using pre and intra workout. So
I've done that too. Then
it's just kind of a safety factor because it slows the gastric emptying. But the thing is, like, here's the thing: like, you may have somewhat of a some pro-inflammatory foods, so to speak, but then your training just has to match, right? So I talked with Matt Porter like years ago. Obviously, it's been a while now, but and he was eating like a high calorie, low carb diet, and he did really well on it. Actually, gained really well without putting on a lot of body fat. We were kind of both messing around with that, and he said, he took ate like a jar of peanut butter a day or something like that.
Wow!
And he would never have done that now because he noticed how inflamed he felt and was. So, yeah, there are probably better choices.
All right. How about Thomas then? Thomas asked us, he says, can you talk about recovery for natural bodybuilders versus enhanced? I did Mike Israetel's 6-day-a-week meso, and after 2 months, it nearly destroyed him, even with reps in reserve.
Yeah. I mean, you're still going to use, regardless of whether you're enhanced or natural, you still would need to auto-regulate in some way. I don't know exactly what Mike's program looks like, but it's if it's a set in stone program and you're 4 weeks into, how long was it? He said 6 weeks.
Yeah.
6 weeks. Yeah. So you're 3 weeks into it, let's say, and you're like, oh, buddy, I'm already ready to have a deload here. And now I think the way Mike does it, he's progressively increase the effort level in your sets, so you go closer to failure. So your perceived reps in reserve at least go down, so you finish out where you're going to closer to failure than you were at the beginning. Yeah. If it's getting to be too much, then you taper it down. You cut the volume in to 2/3. You could still follow that pattern if you want to. Like a lot of people like to do that, but then that's not a function necessarily of being natural or enhanced. So the thing that's interesting there, I mean, I've seen this. I always talk about these two guys who beta tested my Fortitude Training program, and one was natural, and he could train at tier 3. He trained hard and didn't have great genetics for muscle, but he trained hard. He trained with and coached a guy who actually ended up being a 212 pro, and they trained hard. I know this. And then I had another guy who trained really hard, who could only train at tier 1 because he was just blasted by it, and he felt like by the time Sunday ran around, he needed to be, just to recover, he needed like an all-you-can-eat day, like a seafood diet day, like just to be able to come back and train at the lowest volume tier. So, and part of that too is the second guy I mentioned was enhanced. A big dude, would have had a pro card easily now. This was years ago, so he's Canadian. He had to win the overall, I think, and he'd won his weight class, but not the overall. And he's training with probably, almost twice the loads. So being enhanced means you can train heavier, and then the relative stress and the inroads you create by being enhanced, it ends up kind of evening itself out. You're a natural guy and you're bench pressing, incline pressing 205, and you're an enhanced guy and you're incline pressing 405. One guy does 3 sets of 10 to 1 reps in reserve, and the other guy does 3 sets of 10, 1 reps in reserve. It could be that if genetics were the same, that those are equally difficult to recover from. In those two situations, but you've got higher training loads and you got the ability to recover that comes from the gear. So it all just works its way out.
Paul Barnett, he really likes Mike Israetel's training. He said, so Paul Barnett was a guy who did DC training back in the day. So obviously he's no stranger to going to actual hard failure. So he's, I think, a good candidate for a reps in reserve program to really get the most out of it. I've never seen his training videos. I'm not sure if he posts them. I see more of like his progress pictures that he posts, but I have a feeling that his 3 reps in reserve, 2 reps in reserve is still very hard, because he knows what true failure is. Yeah. But as an aging guy now, being in his 40s, he's found that something like that is working really good for him. Yeah.
You're getting, effective reps, so to speak, at different points along those sets, depending on who you are, depending how advanced you are with your training. And, maybe he's doing 15 sets, and he's leaving 2 or 3 reps in reserve each time at 1 week during a training meso cycle that Mike set up that he's following. And he's only getting a half to 1 rep, effective rep out of every set.
But for him, they stagger the volume, so it'll be like instead of increasing by going heavier, they'll increase by adding more volume as it progresses, from what I understand.
Yeah, but like at a given like week 4 or whatever, just
Yeah.
making a comparison between like that and DC, he might be getting just something marginal, but still something out of each of those sets, right? And
Yeah.
compared to DC, where sometimes people feel their joints get wrecked,
Yeah.
and their the nervous system gets wrecked, everything else, he just can't recover from those all-out efforts. So he accumulates the effective reps with a higher volume regime. And Paul's a pretty big dude. I think he's got pretty good genetics. It's not
Oh yeah.
at
I
least
would
average or
agree.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not like pro level, but better than a lot of people for sure.
Dang close.
You know,
Yeah.
when I say
I mean,
pro
if you
level, I
wanted
mean
to,
like, New York pro level. You know what I mean? Who
right.
knows?
Yeah. There's different ways to skin the cat. Some people, and it's what you like to do too. If you're motivated, I mean, some people, they do DC training and it's like, they just like, okay, I'm 6 weeks into this, and I just don't want to go in and do a Widowmaker on my legs. I just don't want to do one.
Yeah.
And some people are like, I can't wait to
Yeah.
talk with the devil, at rep 22, because I'm going to slap him in the face and get rep 23.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And then I'm going to stomp on his foot, and then I'm going to stomp on his, and then I'm going to get rep 24, and then I'm going to bend him over and from behind, and I'm going to get rep 25, and it's like, that's the maniacal. And some people love that. And then other people are like, no. I'm going to say, I see it's hot down there. I'm going to stop right here.
Yeah. Well, and for him too, he was like,
fine.
he just felt like,
heat.
he felt like he couldn't keep up with it as he aged. It was like with age,
absolutely.
And we see other people taking strategies like Tina. She said she had read that paper about the NSAIDs, and she's been using Advil and Tylenol as part of her program. And she said that she feels that her progress has improved since then. Tina's, an older lifter too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about we had somebody, where was this? Cody. He said any benefits in using turmeric, supposedly an anti-inflammatory. I need to get back on that.
Yeah, curcumin. There's different formulations. In the animal research, it's pretty interesting. So one thing that happens as far as muscle growth, you're always sort of looking out for, like, are we impairing that inflammatory response that's necessary, and does it matter? So let's say you take curcumin for the various health benefits. It's got all like anti-cancer and everything else, right? And then you just have to do an extra couple sets to create a little more inflammation to offset whatever anti-inflammatory, and then you're fine. And you like to train, so you're good. The interesting thing that's true of atrophy is it seems to be there's inflammation and a free radical stress that happens when muscles are atrophying. So curcumin has been shown actually to be anti-atrophic. It prevents atrophy in animal models, at least, which is kind of interesting. So if you're on a layoff, like for instance, when I got my new hips put in, I had curcumin in there anyway.
Okay.
But I made sure I stayed on that. So, and I've always sort of wondered, you've got a muscle breakdown component. I haven't seen this studied, but I've always kind of wondered, because curcumin has so many different actions, it's not just purely like a cyclooxygenase inhibitor, like your typical non-steroidal anti-inflammatory would be.
Mm-hmm.
If there might be, for some people, because when you think about this whole cycle of insult, inflammation, everything else, there's so much genetic variability in what happens during that cycle. I wonder, for someone like Tina or whoever it was that asked this question, is if there might be sort of a kink in your arm, or a weak spot, or a place where you could limit or maybe even accentuate aspects of that insult recovery cycle to offset whatever your genetic limitations might be. So if you have too much inflammation, and that limits how often you come back and repeat the stimulus, having an anti-inflammatory might be a good thing, because you get to send the signal. As long as you're not blunting it too much, you could signal it and you can train more often. That's probably to your benefit. If your inflammation isn't high enough, maybe some arachidonic acid, something like that, would be possibly an effective way to amplify the inflammation. If that's something that lacks, if you never get sore, let's say, and You've only grown maybe when you felt a little soreness. That would be someone who that might work for. And then to curcumin, there's muscles always turning over. So we have breakdown and synthesis, and we sort of sometimes John was always big on recognizing this breakdown component, and it's actually really important. It just rarely gets measured. John always talked about, you break the muscle down, you're digging a hole, and the hole has to be filled up, and then I don't know if he said the analogy this way, but you fill it up, and then in order to grow, you have to build the mound on top of that. You're building a mountain, and you're digging a hole and then filling it back up again. Yeah. And I would wonder if for some individuals, and this wouldn't pan out, I haven't seen a study demonstrating this, but for some individuals where those mechanisms that are involved with atrophy, which is activation of muscle breakdown, if curcumin's effect on blunting that atrophy, that breakdown process, might behoove those individuals so that they have a more positive protein balance. So they blunt with curcumin some of that breakdown in some people where that's exaggerated because of their genetic makeup. And then you end up having less breakdown, and you still set a stimulus in place. So you have protein synthesis, and now the balance of synthesis and breakdown becomes more so in your favor because you blunted the breakdown with curcumin.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely I think for a situation where you've been casted, or you're immobilized, or you're going to not be able to train for a while because of an injury or what have you, curcumin definitely makes sense there. And it doesn't seem to blunt growth terribly that I've seen, at least sort of anecdotally.
Yeah, no, this is like just my anecdotal experience, but I remember when John first started talking about super biocurcumin, like 2000, between 2010 and 2014, I'll say. I started using it, super biocurcumin, at about 400 milligrams per day. Sometimes I'd go up to 800. I do recall, and this isn't one of those things where you take an Advil and your head feels better and you say, oh yeah, my headache's gone. But in hindsight, looking back in reflection after I had taken it for a good year or two, looking back over the previous couple of years, I'll tell you, I had less tweaks and just less overall repetitive use issues and stuff like that, because I was always getting banged up at the time working a manual labor job. And it's hard for me to say, because did my training get smarter? Did I wrap my head around things better? How much of an effect did it have? I'm not sure, but it definitely sold me on especially for the aging bodybuilder to use, especially like a good quality like super biocurcumin.
Yeah, the BCM 95. Actually, John asked me to write an article. It's still there on his website on curcumin.
Oh, yeah.
So it was about that time, yeah, and that's when I kind of looked into it. The BCM 95, this supposed 95% bioavailability that they came up with, that study was done with an empty stomach, and from what I've found, absorption doesn't seem to be the same when there's food there.
Okay.
I haven't seen that studied directly, but I know that the original study was done with an empty stomach, and I've used this before. I've had my mom do this. Some people who get a lot of gastric distress from regular NSAIDs, they can take like a hefty dose, like 800 milligrams, several pills of the BCM 95, and get an anti-inflammatory effect for headaches or menstrual pain or what have you. So, yeah, I believe that. So but here, interesting what you said with the repetitive use idea. So that's sort of accumulation of an inflammation, and let's say it's a tendon that just, it's an it can become sort of a chronic tendonitis that becomes a tendinosis eventually. That's accumulating breakdown. So if the curcumin can blunt breakdown, it could forestall then that accumulation, that niggling accumulation in a tendon, let's say, or at the myotendinous junction, where muscles get sore kind of at the end. Yeah. Where the muscle meets the tendon. So yeah, it makes sense what you're saying. But yeah, you're an N of one, and who knows?
Right.
It wasn't a perfectly controlled study.
How about this one? It says FE says, is it useful to make a strategic deconditioning phase to break through a plateau or performance plateau?
Does he mean curcumin?
No, he's just talking in general. Back to training, back to just. I think he was going at this when we were a little bit earlier. We were talking about basically optimal training, and in relationship though, I guess to muscle soreness and everything. Would there be any type of benefit to? And I'm kind of just going off now as we get further in the show here, but it was kind of segued really. Would there be a benefit in a strategic deconditioning phase to break through a performance plateau?
Yes. And that's kind of Mike. I think that's Mike Israetel's. That's his sort of take on why you would have a mesocycle that would start off after you've had a deload of some sort, and then you no longer need to go, to one rep reserve to create the stimulus that you need. But as you then eventually become more adapted and more trained, so to speak, you come closer. You add volume as well as come closer to failure. So because that's what you need after you've adapted to the training stimulus, the training program you're on currently. So you up the ante strategically over time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the idea. Is if you're going nowhere. So the question is whether it's the deconditioning or whether it's taking a break from training where you've reached some point of overreaching that could be functional or non-functional. So overtraining, technically, like it's a really hard thing to study, because when you look at the studies with overtraining, it's very, very hard. They're the scientific community. I'm not blaming anyone, but there's basically a failure to actually consistently come up with a way to produce true overtraining in a group of subjects. Because you have to take people, although we see it in individuals in various studies. We've talked about it here quite a bit, where you see individuals at least overtraining in terms of muscle size, where you've got 3 different volume groups of training, and they publish all the individual data points, and you see maybe some sort of a dose response, but you see individuals in the lowest volume group, and most of them seem to grow, but then one goes backwards, right?
Yeah.
That's deconditioning. It's detraining, so or overtraining, so to speak, or detraining. That's the thing we don't know. Overtraining is you're doing too much and you actually regress in terms of your performance.
Yeah.
From a bodybuilding perspective, the correlate would be that you lose muscle size. In some of those studies, the question is then, okay, they lost muscle size. Is it because they came in and they were used to doing 15 sets per week, and now you dropped them down to 6 sets per week, and now they undertrained and they regressed? And some of the other, and then you'll see individuals in the highest training group, and then they go backwards. So are they suffering from they more than you would suspect, because their training volume is higher, that now they're actually overtraining? So you got someone who's not making any progress, and kind of the question is, do you intentionally try to decondition? And maybe this is just semantics, where you actually lose performance and lose strength, or do you just take a break and allow for a functional overreaching process to occur? So do I wait like 4 weeks until I literally start to lose size? You might need to. If you're Ronnie Coleman, that's what he used to do. Eventually, he had his other issues that, with what happened to him in the long run, but, he wouldn't do Jack Diddley for like 2 or 3 months. And John would do the same thing. He'd finish after a show and he would actually lose weight a lot of times the first 2 or 3 weeks, because his appetite wasn't very big. And he competed at like 220, and I talked to him 3 weeks later. It's like, yeah, I'm going to get back in the gym now. I'm 215, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So whether the kind of deload that you do or what happens there would depend on like what's going on. You might need just a break, and you might need to just, let everything recover. Like I mentioned in my Fortitude Training book, what kind of led to that program was that I actually had truly overtrained. I effed myself bad, man.
Yeah.
And it was like I made good gains for a while, and then I way overdid, and I needed like 2 months off. I just had to. There's just not coming back. There's just no coming back from that, right? Thing, it's very, very, very rare. In that case, yeah, I was deconditioned, that was fine. But if I'm in a state where let's say I'm doing Fortitude Training or another program where I've auto-regulated appropriately, and I pushed myself to where I'm not overtrained, I'm not actually losing size or losing strength in the gym, but I'm plateauing. It's like, or DC training is a good example of this. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm going to let myself decondition, and that won't happen for 3 weeks. Probably not the best idea to intentionally try to decondition, but instead you might do a deload and strategically allow yourself to recover, so then you can reap the adaptation that you set in place, set in motion with that previous training. So yeah, if you're way past it, you may have to decondition. If you're overreached and you want to make it functional, you may have a non-functional overreaching where you're just too far and like you just got to recover and hope that you come back where you once were. Okay. But you may need to actually decondition a little bit. And the thing with, and I'll say this is the last thing I'll ramble about on that, but the thing with DC training, when I was doing DC training for Dante, that I noticed, Dante had a pretty pat way of, this is how you do your deloads. And he would have people say, if you want to, don't do anything, right? He very much left it up to them. There's nothing wrong with that. Or come in and, just do some semblance of DC training, but, leave a lot of reps in the tank. Like I think he suggested drop the weight and leave several reps in the tank. So if you were doing 315, you might drop down to like 255 or 275. And instead of doing 10 reps, you might do instead of doing 12 reps, you might do like 8 reps. So it's really, really easy training. Like only just warm up to what a work set would be.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And some people were coming in, they were literally deconditioned. They were detraining. And they were then they'd have an 8-week blast, let's say, and it would take them 5-6 weeks to get back to where they once were. And then they'd only progress because they went backwards so much. Yeah. So I think that was I would go about that differently. I was sort of doing my best to stick with what Dante's intentions were with the training.
Sure.
And he was really burnt out. It wasn't like I was in direct communication with every day, but when I came to the Fortitude Training, then I modified that and I based it on the science that was available at the time for what a taper is, to then not allow an intentional deconditioning. You still would do muscle round, you still train hard, but your volume and your frequency goes down. So the quality of training stays in place, just like a sprinter getting ready for a sprint. They drop their volume down. They'd still have some fast sprints in there, some high efforts, and then a small period of time where they just kind of totally chill, and then they've super compensated, then they've overreached. So anyway, the answer to the question, it's all about context. It's all about who you are, what you absolutely need. If you're just a wreck, you did 6 shows, and you've been on a bunch of PEDs. And, your blood values are out of whack. It's like, yeah, you probably need to pull everything back, take some time off, let your joints heal up and technically decondition and come in the gym and say, okay, I'm going to be weaker, but you need to do that, because of that circumstances. Whereas a natural competitor, let's say, in an ideal situation, who's auto-regulating properly and knows what functional overreaching is for himself, he's not going to wait intentionally so that he loses adaptations and comes back in weaker and smaller. No, he's gonna time that appropriately so that he can have a functional overreaching experience and come back stronger. So he won't be deconditioned. He'll be uber conditioned. I don't know what the word would be, but he's come back even stronger. He'll be adapted to the previous training. So that's an ideal situation. If you can string multiple mesocycles of training together in that way, shape, or form, that's the way to go, if you can. But the PED use puts a limit on that, because you are pushing your body. You're in turbo, right? Yeah. You got nitro and turbo and everything else. It's like, okay, you got to give the engine some things a rest.
Weren't those American Gladiators? Both of them?
Those were, yeah. Yeah. Those were.
One last question on this subject with inflammation is somebody had asked about caffeine. Any info on coffee's effect on inflammation? Thanks, guys. I don't know about this at all. So this is something, like everything we talk about, I have some sense of what you're going to say, or I've heard you talk about it before, or I have my own thoughts. Honestly, Scott, I have zero clue as to the answer to this one.
What's the name? Coffee has an antioxidant in it.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has some health effects. So, um, devil's in the dose. I think the thing with coffee is that you can use it to mask your fatigue. So you're in a stress situation and you wake up, you're not resting properly, you're not recovering properly. You're going to tend to see maybe your inflammatory markers go up, but your cortisol is going to go up, which is going to have an anti-inflammatory effect. And you get in this vicious cycle of not sleeping enough, using coffee to mask it, and then I think you can go down a road where you've just got an inflammatory situation occurring because you're just out of balance because you're masking your fatigue with the coffee.
That makes sense to me. Here's what I just pulled up on Google. I don't know if you're familiar with these.
Yeah, chlorogenic acid is the one.
Okay.
The antioxidant. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Okay. Yeah. Right on. Hey, we also had one more question for you, and that was, what's the update on your hips?
Oh, hips are good, man. I actually had to run for the first time in a long while. I didn't have to, but I wanted to when my RV broke down on the side of the road, and I was trying to fix it. As it turned out, it was much more disastrous than what I thought in the moment. I actually ran. I must have looked like a total retard when I was actually running. I wasn't supposed to run because the doc said because you can get a little clunkiness in the hips because they have to open up. I don't know if they actually dislocated my hip or not, but they obviously have to open up the capsule and everything to go in. So, it's not as tight as it should be, but that was kind of interesting. The hips were totally fine. I was totally prehab because I was so active.
Yeah.
I think I'm mostly past. I think I told the story here. I had a bleed out on the left side the night of the surgery, and then it didn't bleed out on the right side. I had a huge hematoma.
Yeah, we talked about all of that.
We
talked about
yeah. So
yeah, we just hadn't heard like maybe the last month. Maybe that's where that's where we left off.
I'm finally past that nerve damage. The nerve damage. It's yeah. I mean, I felt it last night. For instance, it's still there. I've been treating it with acupuncture. I'm treating the scar with my acupuncture needles here. And I got my E-stim unit, which I'm using to stimulate some neurogenesis there in that nerve where he apparently severed it with the ginormous needle he went in.
Oh man!
To try to he was trying to evacuate whatever was left in that hematoma, which he got like nothing out of there. So yeah, I'm rehabbing it, and I think it's going to be fine. It'll be good. So I hardly ever limp, but it's like most of the time it's like once and I'm like, it's funny. I've been limping for so long. I still have some of these patterns. I'm very conscious of it now. Like I'm used to like turning in certain ways and using my arm to support myself because that would like totally tweak the nerve.
Yeah.
And I catch myself. I was like, no, take your hand off the friggin' table, dude. You don't need to do that. Start moving like a normal person.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to people as they get older and they lose function. They have all these accommodating behaviors that become unconsciously ingrained habits throughout the day. And next thing you know, you're used to walking upright, and now you're hunched over and you're doing things because maybe you had a walker for a cane for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to undo now, like, basically 3 years of gimping around.
I think just chronic pain in general. I've caught myself doing that kind of thing, maybe favoring certain sides when I've recovered and I didn't need to even.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really funny watching myself do that. But yeah, the hips were nothing, man. The main problem was the hematoma. That's like in those early videos I posted, I couldn't go deep because I got this monster alien hematoma there that like literally hurt,
Yeah.
It was totally taking out my sartorius on the right side because it was right there where the sartorius attaches, and then the nerve pain was nasty. So that was the main impediment to recovery was the hematoma, which they didn't treat, and then when they did, they damaged the nerve. So I'm not complaining, man. Like I got brand new hips. I'm still looking forward. I'm looking forward to, like, weirdly enough, the first time I go to the airport. I have a little card,
yeah.
And just to see, what the guys say, if they even react. I'll probably go through and they'll be like, oh, whatever,
Yeah, they probably see it all the time,
Yeah. But probably not in someone my age.
Yeah.
I'm betting.
Yeah.
not that often.
Just knowing TSA, it's not going to phase them whatsoever. They're just going to be like, yeah, move along, whatever, dude.
I get patted down anyway,
because
of body density. It looks like I have metal all over the place normally when I go through anyway.
Yeah. I think most people watching this podcast right now have had that exact same thing happen to them. When they go to the airport, there's always something that lights up on me. Yeah,
I mean, you look at the scan and you're like, nice fucking machine. Pardon my French. Nice. Trying to keep the F-bombs out so we don't get in trouble again. Nice machine, man. It's like, do I have metal plating throughout my body? Because it just lit up, in everywhere.
Right?
Wolverine status. Yeah.
Tina says she can't wait to go to the Arnold. It's going to be her first time. So that'll be freaking awesome. Cool. And Chris makes a good point. He said, be sure to get on the live stream with Scott, Ron, and Dusty. So check this out, Scott. We're going to have a section of the Mutant booth is going to be dedicated to the podcast for the entire weekend. And they've got a couch and chairs and stuff. So before we had a table, and I had to get in there and just bring all my equipment over, get a couple people from Mutant to help go to the hotel with me, get all my stuff, bring it back over there, get it all set up. Took me an hour and a half of just plugging in cables, taping things down. I'm sweating. So now we're just going to, and then after we're over, it took me a couple hours to break it all down too. And of course people wanted to talk. So now we're just going to get it set up. We'll be good to go. And then somebody walks by and I'm like, hey, there's Tina, come on over. Let's hang out for a few, or, hey, there's Scott Stevenson or whoever else we run into. We can have people come in and sit down and, just shoot the crap with them. Yeah. Yeah. So that should be pretty awesome.
You have them lie down on Scott's psychotherapy couch.
And,
tell me about your deepest fears related to bodybuilding.
In the middle of the expo with all that. The hard thing is there's so much noise there. So you don't have any kind of real deep conversations,
You're just screaming. Yeah, in my experience, this is just normal, and you probably, I would have the same conversation 45 times a day. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it's okay, because people haven't had it yet with you, but it's oh my gosh, I wish I just had a card to give you the answer. Let's talk about something different. Let's talk about you. That's the thing that I'd love to do is actually talk, because they want to ask me about me, because so many people are watching.
Yeah.
And they kind of know me, but I don't know them. It's I want to hear about, tell me about you. What's your next competition going to be? Are you going to compete again? Or what are you doing? I like to flip the script. I always felt bad sometimes. It's no, I'm so tired of talking about myself. Tell me about you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's what I try to do too, is it's cool to get to meet the listeners, because, I mean, honestly, I'm in the studio, which is in my house, right? You're in your kitchen right now. So I'm connecting with you, and then after we're done here, I've got, clients to work with. So I'm immediately this is what my life looks like when we're not podcasting. And then I take a break to go work out in the gym or hang out with the wife. And then at the end of the night, I go upstairs and, we watch some television and go to bed. That's my day. So to actually get out and connect with people, and people say, hey, I listened to all your shows. I'm like, I see it's different from seeing the numbers. You know what I mean? You see the numbers, and I'm like, oh, this is exciting. You see the show growing, but to actually meet people who are like, hey, I listen to you guys every day on my commute, or at the gym doing my cardio. It's to me that's exciting. So that's what I like to do too, is find out more about the people that are actually listening. They've already heard enough about me, all these hours on the shows, right?
Right. They know everything about you.
Yeah.
Right. It seems. Yeah. And the imbalance between what they know about you versus what, nothing about them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In many cases, not always. We've got some regulars that because they're regulars on all the shows and from the comments they've made. But it's hey, I want to talk about you. Tell me about. But they don't want to. Sometimes they want to talk, because that's the nature of the. It's
Oh, Casey's going too. He says he's wearing his It's Just Bodybuilding shirt to the Arnold. Nice. We get to meet in person.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I wore a special shirt. We'll see who, in honor of what happened with YouTube. See if anyone gets this. If anyone can see it. Step back.
I don't know that shirt, Scott. I don't know what that is.
You might see it.
Camacho? Yeah.
For President of America. Of America.
Huh. No, I never saw that. I don't know what this is.
It's from a movie.
Yeah?
It's from a movie called Idiocracy.
Oh, I did see that long time ago.
Well, I was thinking about it, and since I think we're done with the sciencey type stuff, is like, how many podcasts, how many years? I mean, it's totally normal, right? You're like, it totally makes sense. You found out it was just the one little thing, like just like a few dozen letters
Yep.
that took it all out. It's like, how can that be? It's so crazy that one little thing like this, like, what is the world coming to now?
Yeah.
President Camacho, baby.
Yeah, thankfully we've got it fixed and we're back, and we were able to continue doing the same content we always have, guys. So you know, it's probably going to be structured just a little bit differently at first. We're going to stick our toes back. In fact, we're sticking our toes back in the water today, Scott. That's what we're doing here, and we're going to ease back into continue doing all the stuff we normally do. Oh, Carolyn's with us. Carolyn, you coming to the Arnold? You let us know. So that should be. It's going to be awesome, though, man. I'm excited. I'm glad we got the channel back, Scott, because I want to be able to like record stuff and release it through all from the weekend, you know? And if we didn't have that, I'd be going to Rumble still. By the way, guys, if we ever do disappear, definitely go check the content out at Rumble. Everything's mirrored over there now. And it's been mirrored over there. And of course, audio doesn't change anything, but, you know, it'd be, it would be a shame to not to be able to post that stuff to our big channel, you know, at YouTube.
Absolutely. And you're probably putting up shorts, and people will be seeing these. Like, people could literally be watching what you're doing on the other side of the expo while you're doing it, because it'll be live, I think, right?
No, we can't do it live. So get this,
can't.
man.
Okay.
No, if you want to pay for internet at the Arnold, was it the Arnold last year? Yeah. It was something like $10,000 a day for high enough speed internet to be able to stream. So as much as I would like to do that, like even if Mutant was like, hey, we're going to pay for that, I'd just be like, listen, it's not worth it. Let's save your money. You know what I mean? So, and they're so generous.
Cell phones even work there? Can you do it? Could you live stream from a cell phone? Would it even like if you wanted to just?
I mean, probably, yeah. I don't know. I live streamed from FIBO, and that was pretty busy. But I think that maybe Europe is more advanced than us in their like cell technology. You know what I mean? They're like they're going on like 6G already. You know, versus we're just trying to catch up to 5. So yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody. You guys tuning in. You guys are freaking awesome. Go to byobbcoach.com. You can get Scott's book over there. I don't have a link in yet, but by the time you're seeing this, if you're watching the restream of it, then the links will be below, and the link will be available for the hardcover too. Pay no attention to the way the text is written on the website. It's not perfect, but you can get the book there for a better deal than going to Amazon. And of course, check out our awesome sponsors. Thank you to True Nutrition. TrueNutrition.com has been literally the first advertiser to work with us. And they didn't say like, hey, Scott, we want to promote our products through you. It was me that asked them, because I used True Nutrition through every single one of my contest preps. And I learned about True Nutrition from people like Scott Stevenson and everybody else, Skip and everybody else that I podcast with. So they're a great company, somebody I believed in and Scott's believed in for decades now. Use our code THINK over there for some additional savings and to support us. Supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. And thank you to everybody from Patreon, especially through these crazy times that we've been going through. You guys have stuck there with us, and you've been a big part of allowing me to continue doing this thing. So I appreciate the hell out of you guys. Scott, as always, man, it's been a pleasure. I really like this episode. I think we gave him some good stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, we did. I agree.
Cool. See you guys.